Okay, so the first thing, the holes in the ground, this took me a while to find because originally I thought it was an animal or a pest. I thought it was chipmunks. But I went back there a little bit later because I couldn't find anything. And I found a bigger hole that was right beside it, and it connected it to the smaller holes, and it was erosion. So I'm just gonna give a basic description of erosion. Erosion in this case, in this instance, was chemical weathering. So there are many different types of chemical weathering, but for the sake of it being at the top of a stream, I assume that it is dissolution. And dissolution is when water comes in contact with a rock or soil, and it basically breaks it apart and breaks it down into its elemental form, and that's when it gets washed away. Okay, so the reason plants are green is because during photosynthesis, chlorophyll absorbs light, obviously. That's the whole process of photosynthesis. And when it absorbs that light, we can see light. And the most useful light to them are red light and like blue light and all these other colors. So we only see the colors that are reflected or not used, and that is the reason we see green when we look at leaves. Okay, so I wanted to research thorns and why certain plants have them, and we all know it's from self-defense, right? It's for self-defense, my bad, rather, so that they don't get attacked by herbivores. And like the science behind it, basically these are branches that have been converted for self-defense. So picture like a caveman sharpening a stick. That's basically what the plant's doing. Thorns occur in the axil of the leaf and basically grow out like how a branch would, and then they're just kind of like duds and they end up sharp and spiky. Okay, so I was researching tree stumps and why they're such a pain to remove and why they're so big. And I figured out that this is due to the mass of the tree stump. Tree stumps, well, the mass of the tree itself. Over half of the mass of every tree you see outside is within the stump area and the roots. So it's got a really low center of gravity, and when you cut a tree, you're cutting something with very little mass, so it's really easy to cut, but you get down there, and it is just thick. It's so hard to cut, and it's just because of its mass. It's got so much mass. Okay, so basically, I found that, oh, well, I learned a lot about mushrooms. I learned that mushrooms aren't plants, they're the reproductive parts of fungus or fungi. And I learned that the reason that some of them are toxic is because they adapted so animals do not eat them. And this can get kind of counterintuitive because, say, you're out in the wild um, and you're dying, haven't eaten in days, and you see a snail munching on a mushroom. 9 times out of 10, you can't eat that mushroom because these animals have counter adapted to eat the mushrooms that made a toxin to keep it inedible. Okay, and mushrooms, most of them have this thing called amatoxin. And amatoxin messes with your liver if you ingest it. And it's a subgroup of a bunch of toxins that mess up your liver. And that's mainly what is in these mushrooms that will hurt you. Okay, so basically the reason pollen affects humans is because our immune system reacts and develops antibodies that trigger whenever we come in contact with pollen, and it releases these antibodies that cause inflammatory reactions. They release histamines, and histamines are what cause allergy symptoms. So technically, if you're thinking about pollen doesn't do anything to you, it's the body's reaction to pollen in protecting you from pollen. So basically, I learned a lot about minnows. Minnows can navigate through very, very small waterways, like half an inch through grass. So there's a possibility that it rained really hard one day, hundreds of years ago. Well, I don't think the creek's that old, but, a couple dozen years ago, and they navigated through the rain from another creek or a pond or something. And there's also a possibility that at another waterway nearby, an animal ate a minnow and the eggs got attached to its fur. And like this is very possible when it rains because the fur has to be damp. So say the egg gets attached to the fur is really damp. It facilitates the egg to stay alive, and then that animal's walking upstream, and as it's walking, it shakes and falls off into the river. Okay, so I wanted to figure out what's the percentage of acorns that turn into trees, and it's actually really, really small. Or what are the chances? It's 1 in 10,000 that turn into trees. So, and that is dependent on a lot of factors like rainfall, predators like, deer eating the acorns. And so just imagine if double the amount of trees sprouted every year. Earth would look completely different. But yeah, it's due to that. Okay, so I found that crawfish, they pretty much can be found anywhere, like ditches, streams, creeks, lakes. And this is because whenever it rains, they move, they go, unless they're burrowing crawfish. So whenever they sense that there's an abundance of oxygen and water, they go towards that, even if they can't see it. Okay, so the reason that humans are happy in nature is because breathing fresh oxygen releases serotonin or increases the level of serotonin, boosting our mood. And the same can be said for hiking. It raises endorphin levels that also boost your mood. It can also help you sleep because light exposure helps your body produce more natural melatonin. Also, vitamin D is an essential vitamin which can only be found outside.